Good evening, Tasneem. Thanks very much for your time. I remember the first alert that went out the previous day, which was obviously issued by the ANC, which was quickly withdrawn only to be replaced by another alert that now omitted the word white in the... And I mean, there have been lots of conversations ever since on social media among journalists about what the ANC was trying to do there, with some people suggesting that it was an act of desperation. What did you make of it, of the fact that the ANC decided its president should go and meet members of the white community and address them?
Well, it's a case of some really bad phrasing on the part of the ANC and maybe a bit of dropping the ball on the PR there. The ANC does meet with different groups and constituencies. I think just the framing of this in terms of white counterparts or white compatriots was really bizarre, actually. And we need to just question that phrasing and what it means for the ANC to put out something like that around a particular race group in the country. I think it is really bizarre, and it was called out as that by many people.
But
so,
doesn't
yeah,
it
really
speak to the intent then? In other words, minus the spin, that in fact was their intention, except they could have put it better. But, you know, that was the point of organizing that meeting. It was to address the fears of the white community.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's quite clear that the ANC, the intention and that maybe the bad phrasing of it actually speaks directly to that they did want to meet with white South Africans, a particular group of white South Africans, and, you know, they were called out on the phrasing, and I guess if they weren't called out on it, would there have been any problem from the side of the ANC? I mean, that clearly was the intention of the meeting, and then they changed the phrasing to national groups, which I find equally as bizarre, and I think we really need to question how the ANC is conceiving of its election campaign in relation to race in this election again.
But here's an organization that prides itself and is not ashamed of calling itself a non-racial organization. You'll recall that many of the political parties that were formed by people who left the ANC, some of them really took issue with its non-racialism stance. So, you know, what is this then telling us about what has become of the ANC?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a long history here in terms of the politics of non-racialism in the ANC. And, I mean, certainly in the last few years, we've seen from a younger generation of South Africans a real critique of that, the way the ANC has conceived of non-racialism, you know, let's say since 1994, and really poking holes in that kind of conception of non-racialism. So I think there's a lot to unpack if we want to talk about non-racialism in relation to the ANC. Non-racialism certainly doesn't mean that we shy away from talking about race, and I don't think it would have made it any better if the ANC were to address white South Africans, you know, in that way, just phrasing it differently. I think there's a lot to unpack here about race and non-racialism in the ANC. And just to say, we are also that we shouldn't use this to kind of shy away from actually talking about race in relation to electoral politics. It's still an important thing that we need to discuss. And I think we must just make that very clear when we're criticizing the ANC for the way it put together and formulated this particular program.
I mean, we obviously went in that room last night where the president of the ANC addressed that particular group. But from the bits and pieces you've seen and read, did it sound to you like last night the ANC was addressing the issue of race, or was it really merely an attempt really at wooing more white voters?
I I mean, these are all elections exercises at this stage, campaign exercises, gimmicks, and so on. And I think we really need to be honest that times of elections are not times when we actually have real, concrete, substantive debates around issues like race. You know, there's a lot of skirting over really big topics, you know, and where there is that substantive discussion, you know, it is still limited by the whole framework of elections. So I think that's always going to be a difficulty in election time. And certainly this is about wooing a particular group, if you can even call the way they framed it a group. But it is about doing that. And that's what parties are doing now. And that makes it really difficult to have substantive conversations.
Tasneem Esop, thanks very much for your time this evening. She is from the Society Work and Development Institute.